Hello again everyone from Tokyo, Japan, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera, where I'm coming to you today for a change from Aoyama Park. I haven't made a video here in quite some time. I think several months ago I was sitting out here and someone from the college, which is located next to the park, I guess the security guy came out and asked me what I was doing here and said I should be careful not to do any photographing here because the U.S. Army's Hardee Barracks is located kind of right behind me. And as I'm kind of an American and as a, I guess, Army veteran, I have access to go to Hardee Barracks if I want to. He was a little bit confused about that, and kind of just to keep him from getting too concerned, I haven't been making very many videos from here. But anyway, as it's really cold at the park and I don't have a lot of time this morning because I have some things to do later today, I thought I'd run over here and try to make this video somewhat quickly. The other park has been quite busy due to the snow and stuff over there, and an odd thing about this, about living in Japan, is how honest people are here. And when I was walking my dog through the park a few weeks ago, I found this gold ring in the grass, or I should say the dog found it. He's pretty good at finding odd and unusual things. So I picked it up and I cleaned the mud off of it, and my wife says that if I find things like that, I should kind of just leave them where someone can find them, because she's lost jewelry herself too much. And that way, if someone comes back looking for it, they can find it. So I took this gold ring, it's a kind of a simple cheapy 10-karat gold ring, and I set it on this post here next to the map of the park. And that was maybe 10 or 12 days ago, and I came back yesterday and found that the ring is still sitting there. And you know you live in a really honest country when you set a gold ring in a public place where thousands of people walk by every day and no one picks it up. So I thought this might be interesting to some of you people out there, to give you an idea of what Japan is like. Anyway, subject of today's video is going to be a Petri camera. I don't do a lot of videos about Petri cameras because I don't normally sell a lot of these. This particular camera is the Petri F2, which was introduced in 1957, I believe. For those of you who are new to my channel, I sell vintage Japanese cameras in my online store, japanvintagecamera.com. I have an Etsy store which is also called Japan Vintage Camera, so if you'd like to buy this Petri or another vintage camera, please visit one of my stores. I'll post links to my stores in the description below the video. So the Petri Camera Company was originally called the Kuribayashi Company. Kuri bridge, Hayashi or Bayashi means bridge in Japanese. But like many other Japanese names, it's a little bit hard for people to pronounce who aren't Japanese. So for whatever reason, they chose the name Petri, and that stuck. And Petri made cameras for quite a number of years. Most of them were rather inexpensive, I guess, consumer grade cameras or lower level consumer grade cameras. Quite popular with servicemen coming to Japan and buy something to take photographs with. Some of these you find in overseas sometimes have an EP mark, meaning that they were bought at a military post exchange or whatever. They were fairly popular here in Japan. The quality of these cameras is quite across the board. They range anywhere from cheap junk to extremely high quality cameras. And when I say extreme high quality, I mean cameras like the Color 35. The Petri F2 fits somewhere in the middle. It's a good quality camera, probably similar in quality to, say, the Olympus cameras of this era. Maybe not as good quality as the Konica, but still an overall good camera, and with actually quite a good lens. I was doing some research about these cameras, the Petris with the f2 and f1.9 lens. I was really surprised at the quality of the photographs that they were able to take with them. This is a very simple, fully mechanical camera. It requires no batteries or anything like that. It just has your typical manual settings of an old rangefinder camera. It looks something like a mix of, say Contax and Leica alike. We have the sharp corners, which you find kind of like on the Canon style rangefinder cameras. The windows kind of mimicking, I guess, the Contax or Nikon rangefinder cameras of the era. The style was quite popular in Japan, and a very simple control layout, and a pretty well thought out camera, especially for one which was considered something, I guess, in the lower price range. There were 3 different versions of this camera available in 1957, 1958. The least expensive was the f2.8 version. The most expensive was the f1.9. And this one sits somewhere in the middle. And personally, this is probably the best value of the three. I don't really like the smaller lens in the f2.8 camera. The ones I find tend to have a lot of haze and issues with them. And the f1.9 camera is a little scarce. They're kind of popular with Petri collectors. There's kind of a cult of Petri collectors here in Japan because Petris aren't especially expensive cameras, so you can, for not a lot of money, you can put together a complete collection of their different models. This one here is, just the basic, I guess, all-around good Petri camera of that era. Let's go ahead and take a look at the features, controls, and functions. And starting on the top here, we have the rewind dial knob, whatever you want to call it. It's a kind of a knob here. This lever pops out with an arrow telling you which way to turn it. We have the flash shoe here for mounting a flash gun. This camera will of course use the old bulb style flashes. You can also use a strobe flash. There's a sync socket located here on the lens. On the right side here we have a combined frame counter and film speed reminder setup, very similar to the Nyoka cameras, which is kind of a higher quality version of this camera with a better lens, but still this is not a bad camera. The frame counter window is on the top here, and then the film speed is set by turning this pointer here. We have two options. We have black and white or color. Here we have a shutter release button, and we don't have a way to use a cable release on this, but I believe Petri made kind of a slip-on accessory to allow you to use the cable release on these cameras. And of course here we have the film winding and shutter charging lever. Shutter still works good after all these years. On the back here we have this kind of tiny viewfinder window. It's a little bit difficult if you wear glasses, but quite visible for normal use, and not much smaller than what you find in, say, the Leica L-mount cameras of that year, though not quite as good as, say, the Canon. More like, I guess, the old Nikon S. This is kind of a few different quirky things they borrowed from the Nikon S. On the bottom here we just have a standard 1/4" tripod socket, and we have the release here, which you depress to rewind the film. On the front here we have kind of the important stuff. First we have this handy tab here for focusing the lens, and we have of course the focusing scale here, which is arranged in feet on this camera, so you can tell this is kind of designed for export use. And behind that we have the depth of field scale, which lets you know how much depth of field you have at any given aperture. You can see the black ring here. You can either use the focusing tab or use the ring if you prefer to use your other hand for focusing. In front of the black ring we have the aperture ring, which is arranged from f2 to f16, but without any stops on it, so you kind of have to watch where you're turning it. You can't really count the clicks as you turn from one speed to another. In front of that we have the shutter speed dial. One of the good things about this camera is it has a high quality Copal shutter with a maximum speed of 1/500th of a second. This one's a little bit stiff because it needs to be lubricated a little bit, but still works quite well. I really like these shutters because they are reliable, they're reasonably accurate, and in my case they're not that difficult to repair. So if I need to take this out and overhaul it, it's maybe a 1-hour job to get it done right. One thing that people sometimes ask me about with the cameras, these old cameras, is that they say it's kind of hard to turn it to the 1/500th speed. And sometimes they think there's something wrong with the camera because of this, but that's really normal. The reason it's hard to turn to the 1/500th speed is because there's a booster spring which gives the shutter an extra push to make it be able to cycle that fast. Another thing, when you have the camera set to 1/500th, it's going to be a little bit harder to wind than at the other speeds, because when you're winding, you're of course cocking the shutter at the same time, and the extra resistance to the extra spring here will make it a little bit harder to wind. In the front here, just the lens itself. This is what is called a Petri Auracore 45mm f2 lens. 45mm lenses were quite popular in those days. It gives you a slightly wider field of view than the typical 50mm lens. What was called the normal lens back then, they were quite popular, was the 58mm lens. I think this was better for taking pictures of people a little bit closer up. This one here is better suited to general photography, not quite wide enough to be considered a wide angle lens, but for just general shooting outdoors or indoors, a really good focal length. On the bottom here we have this kind of a switch here, which you use to switch between the flash mode and the manual mode, and over here we have a self-timer lever. Loading the film is quite simple. We have a little catch here located on the bottom, which pops open the door and lets you open it up. And this camera is nice and clean on the inside. I really like to get these old cameras which are nice and clean. They've been kept in a clean, dry, cool place, which isn't so common here in Japan. Loading the film is simple. Just push up the plunger, drop your film canister, push this back down, pull the film leader around, feed it into the slot here, and turn it until the teeth are engaging both holes on either side of the film. Close the door and it's ready to go. Anyway, that's it for my review of the Petri F2 camera. I hope to have this camera listed for sale soon in my shops. If you'd like to check it out, please pay them a visit. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.